Welcome, everyone, to Scheller Lunchtime Live, a live stream series hosted by the Georgia Tech Scheller College of Business. My name is Lindsay Kane, and I'm the Associate Director of Client Relationships for non-degree executive education programs. On select Fridays at 12 p.m. Eastern, you'll have the chance to hear from Scheller faculty, student, and alumni speakers as they discuss relevant topics for the tech-driven digital age. At Scheller, we're proud to offer undergraduate, MBA, and PhD programs, along with open enrollment and custom executive education programs. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tim Halloran, Senior Lecturer of Marketing and Faculty Director of the Scheller Executive MBA program. He teaches product planning, marketing research, and the core marketing class in the Executive MBA, full-time MBA, and undergraduate programs at Scheller. Tim has built, directed, and consulted with some of the world's largest brands, including the Home Depot, Kraft Foods, Procter Gamble, Delta Airlines, the NBA, and Turner Broadcasting System. Prior to academia, Tim spent 11 years at Coca-Cola, leading multiple beverage brands. His first book, Romancing the Brand: How Brands Create Strong, Intimate Relationships with Consumers, won numerous awards and was named by Forbes as one of 7 actionable books for smart entrepreneurs. His latest paper, Let's Give Them Something to Talk About: Which Social Media Engagements Predict Purchase Frequency, was a featured article in the Journal of Interactive Marketing. Today, Tim will examine the role of the customer journey map and how it can add value to the customer experience. He'll discuss how the steps of the customer journey should be identified, 2 key indicators that separate positive customer experiences from negative ones, and share tips on how to optimize your customer's experience. As always, feel free to ask questions in the comments section. Tim will address as many questions as possible at the end of his presentation. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. And I'm really excited to kind of be back. I did this about a year ago, and it really is fun. And so I want to kind of make this interactive. So please feel free to ask questions as we go through it. As Lindsay said, we're going to do a couple things today. We want to talk about customer experience and how that impacts your brand affinity and your customers' affinity to your brands. We then want to talk about mapping your customer's journey, the firm performance, how well you do, and that impact on the customer's journey, and then how we can impact the customer experience. So give you maybe a tip or two to think about in terms of interacting and engaging with your customers in a better way. So as many people know, I'm a brand guy. My background is in brand management. And so I always like to kind of think about these things through the eyes of the brand and customers and consumers' experiences with the brand itself. So when I talk about this, right, I think about, well, what do you think about? What comes to mind when you see this, right? And obviously this is the Starbucks logo. And I'm sure there's a number of things that go through your mind when you're thinking about Starbucks. You might be thinking about the product itself. I've had one this morning, right? And what it's going to do for you. You might think about the cup, but you probably are also going to think about how you got to Starbucks and your experience within those Starbucks outlets, whether it's through an online app ordering system, going through the drive-through, experiencing the ambiance in the store. And all of these contribute to the brand, right? In terms of what we think about when we think about Starbucks. Now, you can see on this, there are some specific words that may kind of talk about the product itself, but there are a lot of words that may talk about the experience that customers have within Starbucks, right? Relaxing, comfortable. So, and again, like all brands, Starbucks has positive words, and there are also a few negative words associated with it. And it's our job to try to really figure out how we're going to enhance that customer experience to increase the positive attributes, to increase the positive associations that our customers have with our brands. So if you think about the best brands out there, the brands that really win in customer service and customer experience, right? You think about what they do and how they treat their customers, right? The experiences that they offer. And invariably, you're going to find that they're very consistent. They consistently express a similar, whether it's how they serve you, how they pamper you, the thrills that they give you, the help that they give you. All of these brands all these experiences impact your brand's affinity. And as we think about it, right? And as Lindsay mentioned, I spent many years at the Coca-Cola company. And one of the things we always talked about was that everything communicates. So that brand is determined by every single touch point that you have with the customer. Everything goes into it, from the stores to the website, to your salespeople, to your events, to your customer support. Everything drives how you feel about that particular brand and how that experience ultimately manifests itself into your thoughts and opinions of the product or service that you're using. So let's talk about it. It's everybody's job, right? It's not just the marketing department's job. One thing we like to talk about is that everybody impacts the customer's experience, from the designers of the app to the on the floor salespeople to the people that are developing the products themselves. So we want to think about creating value with the customer experience. And if you think about what that is, right, a definition of this is customer experience is really the internal and subjective response that customers have with any direct or indirect contact with the company. So in other words, right, think about that definition for a minute. Subjective response, not objective, right? It's the subjective viewpoints of the customer, the direct or indirect contact with the company. So it's not just about their experience specifically with your organization and with your company. There might be some ancillary stops along the journey that also impact and give them a perception of ultimately your brand, maybe things that you don't even directly control. So we like to think about this, and Professor Ajay Kohli and I teach this class in the Executive MBA program, and we do an exercise with our Executive MBA students. And we ask them to talk a little bit about a recent flying experience, right? And of course, usually Executive MBA students have that and are ultimately got a lot of funny stories there. We usually end up with stories that, result in a few chuckles, but inevitably people will talk about a delightful experience they've had, and they will talk about a frustrating experience that they've had. And inevitably what we find that on that airplane flight, there are delighters, the people that have had a great experience. Inevitably, they will come up and say, well, gosh, I went on the plane and I had extra leg room, or the service was fantastic. Hey, they gave me something I wasn't expecting. They gave me free alcohol, right? I got to get off the plane faster. These were what we call delighters. They were not necessarily something I expected, but something that wowed me, that I really delighted in and surprised me. Then we talked to the people that didn't have such a good experience, right? And we found that there were some must-haves, table stakes, things that I would normally expect a company to deliver that maybe the airline just didn't deliver for me, right? The flight was late. The bags didn't work. It didn't fit in the overhead compartment, right? The food was terrible, or I didn't get food, or I didn't get a drink service, things that I would normally expect on the flight. And we have to think about this in terms of what the customer's expectations are versus what our performance is. It's all about, you've heard the classic idea of managing expectations and then exceeding expectations. The same thing goes in customer experiences. So then we ask them and say, now, wait a second here. Let's think about the total travel experience, not just your time on the airplane. What factors apart from the flight itself affect the customer experience? And then we get a really interesting dynamic, right? We kind of start thinking about, it becomes bigger than just that flight itself. And that's the impetus of what we call mapping the journey, right? We want to think about the entire map, right? If you think about when you develop a map, or when maps are developed, you're going from point A to where your destination is. And you're trying to find the easiest, quickest place to get from point A to point B. And you're going to have obstacles potentially along the way. So when we think about it with customers, we want to think about mapping the customer journey. Now, there's lots of ways out there, right? In the literature, there's a lot of ways to map the customer journey. We see people going from engaging and to all the way to buying, to using, to sharing, right? We have some that go out there and talk about initial awareness and how you get them from awareness, and then they go research the products and how you're doing there, and then they buy and experience it. You've got even some fancy terms out there, right? These moment of truths, right? The zero moment of truth when you're first discovering the product, to the first moment of truth where you're trying to decide whether you want to buy it, to the second moment of truth, which is really when you actually engage and purchase the product and use the product. We like to keep it simple. Okay, so I want to let's just keep this simple. And we like to think about it in terms of the purchase experience, the usage experience, and then the post-usage experience. And if you consider these, there are a number of steps within any type of purchase, right? So let's go back to our airline example, right? You want to create this map from your customer's point of view. In other words, you want to go in there and say, what is my customer going to experience from the time that my customer engages for the pre-flight experience all the way to the end of the experience? So let's look at this, right? Let's map out. Here's a prototypical way you might map out something like this, right? From the time they're first deciding, you know what, I'm going to take a flight. I need to take a flight. And I'm going to search online, or maybe I talk to a travel agency, and you can kind of see the different steps that it takes for somebody to actually, let's say it's a business trip, all the way to when they get to their destination, even submitting their receipt for reimbursement from their company, right? That's the entire experience. Now, you probably noticed there's some red asterisks, some red stars by some of these things. And the question then becomes, how much direct control does an airline have over some of these activities and experiences? And the answer is, well, they're not directly under their control, right? Going through security is not under Delta's control if you're at the Atlanta airport. However, does it impact your perception of what that experience is as a customer? Absolutely. If it takes me a long time to get to the airport, if it takes me a long time to get through security and there's a lot of hassle along the way, maybe the next time that I have an opportunity to fly, it's a 6 hour, I can either choose to fly or drive somewhere that's maybe 6 hours away. Maybe I think to myself, I had such a bad experience going through security or what have you, that, yeah, it's not worth it. I'm going to just go ahead and drive. Delta's out that money. So what you need to think about is mapping this from your customer's point of view. There are things you can control directly, and there are also some things, though, that you may be able to impact, right? Delta impacts security. Delta gives their frequent flyer miles free clear check, gives them discounts on TSA pre-check, right? That's a way to help speed up the process. So those are things that we need to think about, because ultimately when we think about customer journeys, there are 5 gaps out there, right, that turn these journeys sour. First, you got your customer's dream experience, right? This is utopia. They don't expect that, right? They expect something close to their dream, but here's what they normally expect. This is generally the experience actually delivered. That's gap number 1. Gap number 2 is the manager's perception of what the customers expect versus what they actually expect. Gap number 3 is what the managers communicate down to the employees. And finally, gap number 4 is the experience that is actually delivered, which all leads up to the 5th gap, which is the experience that marketing and sales promise, which is utopia, right? And if you can see the difference between what is being promised versus what is actually delivered, it can be a very big delta. So one thing we like to look at here is a Kano model, which there are 3 arrows here, right? And interestingly enough, if you look at this model, the red arrow, customer satisfaction on the y-axis and performance on the x-axis, if I do everything right in terms of must-haves, right? These are the expected things you're supposed to be delivered. I shouldn't even have to ask for them if I'm the customer. If you do your job right here, right, you might get to average customer satisfaction. You can't get much better than that. Now, there's another category that we call, so first thing you have to do is you have to fix the must-haves, right? Satisfiers. This is kind of a one-to-one thing. This is like, I'm expecting this, but I might have to ask for it, right? Hey, can I have, if I'm on that airplane flight, can I have another Diet Coke? Yeah, sure. Okay, they deliver it for you. Can I have the whole can? Whatever it happens to be, right? So that's kind of a one-to-one. So we want to improve our response rate to those. And then finally, if we think about it on the top, look at this one, right? Boy, this one, if you deliver, if you have strong performance, look what happens to your customer satisfaction. These are delighters. This is unexpected and not asked for by customers. And if we can deliver that, if we can imagine delighters, that things that people aren't even thinking about that we can deliver, our customer satisfaction goes through the roof. Of course, over time, we need to continue doing that because over time, the delighters become satisfiers and the satisfiers become must-haves. So we're needing to constantly think through, how do we improve our delighters? So at the end of the day, there are really kind of two key indicators of customer experience, right? There's effort and then there's emotions. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to try to share with you a video here and see if we can play this real quick and see if you can kind of get an idea of what this is.
There's so much choice, confusion, and anxiety involved in buying cosmetics. People often stay with what they know. In this environment, how do you get people to try on your product? We gave them an entirely new way to try on makeup.
Oh my god! Oh, it's exciting, isn't it?
This is Makeup Genius from L'Oréal Paris, the first mobile app to let you try on makeup using nothing but your phone. Makeup Genius scans your face and allows you to select from a huge range of L'Oréal cosmetics. And the result is so realistic, it's like you're actually wearing it.
There I am! It's red lipstick. Oh, I could look like pure reds. Oh, wow!
To users, it seems like magic, but the augmented reality behind Makeup Genius was 18 months in the making, incorporating thousands of products and over 100 unique facial expressions. You can try on just an eyeliner or create complete looks. Once you like what you see, you can save your look and share it with friends. And you can purchase directly from the app. Makeup Genius takes out the hassle of the in-store experience, allowing you to scan products and try them on virtually. The launch of Makeup Genius caused something of a stir, resulting in over 14 million people downloading it. And so far, they've tried on over 60 million different looks, using over 260 million products. That's 260 million more product trials worldwide. Makeup Genius from L'Oréal Paris.
I can't stop looking at myself.
So hopefully you were able to see in that and able to hear that there was really, you saw two things, right? There are two key indicators of customer experience. There's the effort involved, and then there are the emotions that happen as a result, right? And emotions can be directly as a result of the customer experience, or they can be impacted by the effort or the lack of effort that I have to exude. So let's look at effort first. Let's go back to the map, right? So you got to ask yourself, look, if I've mapped out this scenario, how can I impact my customer's effort? How can I impact their emotions? So let's tackle effort first, right? There are two ways that we think about reducing your customer's effort. We've already mapped out this journey, right? And let's say, just take one, right? The pre-purchase stage of our airline example. The two big ways we can reduce customers' efforts are figuring out how many steps the customer is taking and how much effort is being exuded at each step. So what we want to do after we've done that analysis, right, we want to think about, hey, how can we reduce the number of steps? Right, here's some examples of some companies that do a pretty good job of having gone in and reduced the steps. Gone from 10 steps to 8 steps. Makes it easier. And then within each step, how do we make those remaining steps easier for our customers? In other words, how do we ease the pain that might happen or occur at each one of those steps? Because that ultimately will lead us to emotions too, right? We've all been there, right? Dealing with the cable company, dealing with the bank, dealing with whatever group you've dealt with, right? And there are a couple of different emotions that take place. The red ones here in my chart are bad, right? Anger, anxiety, frustration, pain. Of course, there's sometimes they're good, right? Achievement, they've worked with me, they helped me win, they did something for me. Happiness, they went over and above what they thought or what I thought, what I expected. Usually those red ones are because of the effort or the amount of effort or the hassle that I have to put forth. And usually those green positive emotions are because I've been surprised and delighted by something the company has done. So you want to make sure you imagine those delighters. What are those things that are going to make your customer really drive their emotion? Because if we can do that, right, if we can ease the effort and we can increase and imagine these kind of delighters, and ask yourself this question, go back to the old Beach Boys song, wouldn't it be nice, right? What could we do here? Because if we can do that, right, I go to a quote from Maya Angelou about people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. This is what drives connection with brands, the power of emotions. My prior experiences with the brand will ultimately, going back to my Starbucks example, help me feel more engaged with Starbucks, help me feel more connected, strengthen my relationship with this brand. So one final point, and then we'll bring it up for questions, right? How do we deliver this, right? So how are you going to do this? Well, just kind of think through what we just talked about, right? Deep dive into that customer's experience, right? And assess their emotions and their effort across each one of those steps. And then think about how we can design those touch points that we talked about, all those different touch points that the customer experiences. How do we design them to where they're going to delight them from an emotional standpoint, surprise and delight, and also reduce the amount of effort that they have to have, right? The amount of steps or the amount of effort per step. And if we can do that, right, and there's lots of ways to do that. You can do that through design thinking, what's beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today, but figure out ways that these touch points, people, physical surroundings, machines, automation, messaging, and products can ultimately impact that experience. And if we do that, we win. If we do that, we strengthen that relationship between our customer and brand. And if we do that, our customers become more loyal to what we have to offer. So with that, I think I have a few minutes for questions, if that works for everybody. Lindsay, does that work? Do you have any questions?
That sounds great. Well, thanks so much, Tim. Really interesting. And I know there's some folks chiming in with some delighters they've experienced recently. So really cool to see. Are companies using AI to map the customer journey, and what outcomes are they seeing?
Yeah, AI is such an interesting technique, right? Because we can go through and really use data and analytics, which help us to kind of understand maybe the expected steps that our customers are going to take, right? We can use predictive analytics to go in and say if they bought A and B, or if they went here, they're going to go there. So absolutely, analytics can become a huge part of this. The more data you can collect on how your customer goes through that journey, winds through that journey. I almost think about, going back to mapping technology, right? Waze kind of knows based on what's going on out there, where to take you, what roads to take you, what roads to avoid based on current issues. So yes, absolutely using that technology is becoming a bigger and bigger part of things.
Yeah. And I think of, online shopping. I get a lot of those, hey, because you were interested in this, you may want to try that. And, very guilty of hitting purchase often.
Yeah.
And, even Starbucks too. I'm a very loyal Starbucks user, member, whatever we want to call it. And I think the app for me brought me closer to the brand. I can do my online ordering, just run up the street and pick it up. And then, the gamification too, earning stars and things like that towards my next drink or food, whatever, is really cool too. So.
Yeah. And that's a great experience. That's a way to kind of surprise and delight, right? I mean, I don't know if you get they take Starbucks, for example, right? You've transformed somewhat of the experience in store, right, within your phone. And that's, again, another way we can use technology through loyalty programs and through stars. I don't know if you get the thing special. Hey, this weekend, if you order twice, we're going to give you some of these bonus stars. We're going to enhance your loyalty. We're going to give you something. And I'm a big fan of what Starbucks and other companies do versus discounting, right, which is one way you could go. But the other way is to reward you. And again, that helps with the experience. It gets back to that achievement emotion. Hey, I've ordered so many Delta. I've taken so many flights. Ooh, I'm a gold member now, or I'm a platinum member now. I've earned that status. And again, it all gets back to the experience, and it makes me feel better about the brand itself.
Yeah. How can a company counteract or repair a bad brand experience?
Yeah. Well, I think that always happens, right? That will happen. And I think the idea is to acknowledge that honesty and transparency is always my number one rule when it comes to engaging with customers and their experience. If you're honest and open and transparent, and simply and apologize, right? And just say, hey, we didn't do well here. I think sometimes it's as much about just acknowledging that the company has made an error versus ignoring the concern. I think I see in my research and my work that people get almost as mad if there's just no response versus some kind of acknowledgement of what the consumer's problem was. And yeah, a way to surprise and delight may be, hey, you experienced this. We realized we were in the wrong. We realized you had a bad experience. Here's what we're going to do about it now.
Yeah.
Wasn't expecting that. Gets back to that Kano model that I talked about.
Right. This is interesting. Any recommendations on platforms for capturing and organizing journey data, home built or off the shelf solutions?
Gosh, I am not up to speed on the latest and greatest in terms of technologies on that. But I know there are a bunch out there, but specific ones, maybe some people in the chat have some specific examples of how they might do that. But a lot of companies do that internally, right? With their own reward loyalty kind of buying programs. Yeah.
So it's generally accepted truth that only those people who respond to surveys are either extremely satisfied or extremely dissatisfied with a product or service. Given that, how can a company persuade a customer to respond to surveys and give feedback about an experience?
Yeah, the classic answer to always that is give it, incentivize them in some way, shape, or form, right? Give them something, surprise and delight them to helpfully try to get more responses to your survey. Let them know how important it's going to be for you, and let them know that that their data is taken seriously. Let them know that they're going to be anonymous. There are a lot of ways you can kind of encourage that. Make the survey easy to understand, easy to take, and quick to take. The idea there is that, again, simplicity, ease, and make sure they know, right? I mean, if you're trying to cultivate a relationship with a customer, right, let them know that their input is important to you and it's going to help make their experience better.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of the fill out the survey and we'll give you $5 off your next purchase. So do that.
Right. Yeah.
So what, I think we have time for one more question, but what would be the difference between B2B, B2C, C2C customers kind of in this customer journey mapping?
Well, interestingly enough, we do another thing, Ajay and I do another thing where we do that plain exercise, but we say, okay, what if you're buying an excavator? And what if you're buying this huge B2B product? Guess what? Doesn't change, right? The steps may be different, but you still have that pre-purchase, that purchase, and that post-purchase kind of experience. So go back to the maps, articulate what are the various steps that my customers have to go through on this journey, and ultimately impact. How is that going to be impacted? How can I impact that? On a B2B thing, you got a lot of other external factors going on. You've got more groups making the decision. You have a greater, you have all the different roles within an organization. The steps, though, the steps and the journey, if you can map it out that way, you can use this technique regardless of the kind of B2B, B2C, C2C kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tim. I know there are other questions, and I'm sorry we haven't been able to get to them. But our next Scheller Lunchtime Live is Friday, December 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern, featuring Tiffany Johnson, Assistant Professor of Organizational Behavior at Scheller. Tiffany will discuss the role of third-party mediators who act on behalf of employees with disabilities and their employers. She will also examine strategies for allies and advocates working for equity in the workplace. You can register for this event and can learn more about future Scheller Lunchtime Live sessions by following the Georgia Tech Scheller College of Business on LinkedIn. A recording of this session and future sessions will be available on our LinkedIn and YouTube pages. Thank you all for joining us.